the reason why mental health is so taboo is because when we think about mental health, we're really thinking about mental illness, like psych wards and, like straitjackets and
the movie version of like a padded room, straitjacket. Yeah.
Like therapy, like psychiatrists. You're crazy. It's all in your head.
Dime si a veces no te ha pasado, te levantas un tanto malhumorado, pasando el día para estar calmado, actuando diferente y los mismos resultados.
This is Salvis Unidos podcast, connecting Salvadorans to each other and the world, with your host, Carlos Guadron.
Mental health matters, but for many in our community, it's still a tough conversation. Maria Alfaro, founder of One Paso, is changing that. Inspired by her own journey as a first-gen Salvadoran-American, she created a nonprofit dedicated to destigmatizing mental health through culture, education, and healing spaces.
Pero es que soy como un lobo solitario que por dentro.
Hello, everyone. I am Carlos, your host of Salvis Unidos podcast. Don't forget that if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, we also have a video version available on YouTube. So check that out. Like, subscribe. You know the deal. Also, thank you to the Patreon supporters that make this possible. Don't forget to check out the Patreon exclusive After Hours podcast, where we ask controversial questions for all our guests. So if you're not already, please consider following us and supporting us on Patreon. Today, I'm really excited to have Maria Alfaro on the show. Thank you, Maria, for being here. And here we are in beautiful One Paso headquarters down in Yonkers, just outside the Parque de los Viejitos. So welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess just to hit the ground running, Maria, can you tell us what is One Paso and what services do you offer?
Yeah, so One Paso is a 501c3 mental health nonprofit organization founded in 2020. And we are a mental health movement on a mission to destigmatize mental health by educating and empowering our community through healing, conversations, and culture. And so some of our services, we offer weekly support groups in both English and Spanish. We have weekly youth groups where we carry out a program that's all about storytelling and educating our youth on emotional regulation. And we have like a cool podcast equipment that our youth are able to use to carry out that storytelling. And then we have our favorite program, according to our community. It's called Salsa a Salud, where we make the connection between the mind and the body in an effort to destigmatize mental health. And that's through salsa dancing. And so that's led through our salsa instructor, dance instructor, but he's also a social worker.
Oh, wow. Yes. Awesome. Great synergy there. Yeah. So I've read that you went through a pretty difficult time growing up. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience and how it led you to deciding you want to start something like One Paso?
Yeah. So that, tying it back to our founding story. So my childhood, growing up here in Yonkers, super unstable, right? And so I'm first gen Salvadoran-American, born here, and my parents both born in El Salvador. And so growing up here, I growing up would see my mom go in and out of the hospital. And, my grandmother or my dad would say que mami estaba enferma. And so physically, I didn't see anything wrong with her. And so that's sort of what sparked me becoming curious on like, okay, you guys are telling me she's sick, but like, what's going on here? So it was when I was about 15, 16 in high school. And I was able to select a topic of choice through a program that I was a part of, which was a scientific research program. And over the last 3 years, I was able to study this topic of choice and decipher through college level research articles that the teacher helped me, decipher through. And so my topic of choice ended up being psychology, mental health, the brain, and specifically around my mom's bipolar disorder. So it was through the learning about mental health, really just like the basics of what my mom's condition was, through these research articles, that allowed me to see my mom in a different light. So it allowed me to see that these behaviors that I saw growing up were a part of her condition, and that a lot of this was out of her control. So it really allowed me to release a lot of resentment, this education, right? Like just becoming aware of that. This is the thing that she's been experiencing. You know, this was not all in her head. She is not crazy. My childhood wasn't stable, and she had to go to the hospital because of this. This is what, you know, me learning about mental health at that age, this is what inspired me to create what is today One Paso.
Oh, awesome. So it's in a way liberating. Like it gave you that knowledge to understand what was going on, and kind of allowed you to let go of that resentment. And furthermore, it seems like it inspired you to help other people get there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because once I was able to, you know, go through those last 3 years of high school, and like I learned, and it was senior year, I remember trying to figure out, you know, like, okay, so my passion for mental health was clearly born there, you know, through that knowledge, through that sort of realization on like, oh my gosh, you know, this is what's been happening. So it was like, what direction do I want to take it in? Do I want to go the clinical route and like social work, psychology? At one point I wanted to become a psychologist, and I was like, you know, do I want to do that? I thought about it, and I said, you know, I didn't want to, right? But I did know I wanted to continue learning more. And so my bachelor's is in behavioral sciences, so psychology, sociology. And then I continued my education, and I pursued a master's in organizational leadership, because for me, I feel like leadership is so important. Representation in leadership is so important. One, as a person of color, right? As a female, as a Latina, as a Salvadoreña, all of these things are so important. And so it is often that at the top in those leadership roles, right, that the important decisions that impact and trickle down to our community are made. So navigating the mental health system with my mom, with her condition, right? Going to the psychiatrist with her, social worker, therapist, her hospitalizations, and seeing the system and the change that needed to be, or that continues, you know, that improvements that needs to be made, you know, really made me follow that path to becoming a community leader, the leader of an organization, because I wanted to be able to give my insight, give my perspective, you know, through the lived experience that I have, and be able to impact the services that our community utilize and that are there for our community, which is what we do today at One Paso.
Awesome. So let's briefly go through the steps, the process that you took to get to One Paso. And from what I've heard, you started out with just a blog, just wanting to talk about mental health issues. Can you tell us like how step-by-step that led to what One Paso is today? Yeah.
So that's interesting journey, because for me at the time, so this is 2019, I was not ready, or I had not embarked on my own healing journey. I hadn't gone to therapy yet, you know, to like deal with and unpack everything that I had gone through as a result of my mom's condition and just growing up, you know. So I felt at the time that I wanted to share the experiences I had gone through, and then after having graduated college, and I wanted to share, and I felt like it could help other people. And so I did what I knew how to do best at the time, which was write. So like I said, because I hadn't embarked on that healing journey, hadn't gone to therapy yet, I didn't know how to fully express in words what I had gone through. So it was through writing. that I was able to do that. And so I did it through a blog called Que Paso Latina. So this was 2019. And I started this and I launched the blog, had a website, and I soon, would just day to day, living life, go out with friends, hang out in community. And people would approach me and like in conversation, we'd start talking about the blog posts that I shared and the different topics and experiences that I would write about. And so here I am, writing because that's what I knew how to do and that's what I felt comfortable doing at the time. And then here are people wanting to have conversations with me about what I was writing. And so naturally,
this was like just friends or like strangers, like
friends, friends of friends who like sort of like would
follow your blog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even online too, because online, folks would reach out, but in person. So, they would sort of want to have conversations with me about it. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not ready.
I guess this is happening.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's do this. So it was cool because it naturally forced me to start to unpack and put into words, right? What I felt that I couldn't. So I love that it was like community who pushed me to do that, and beautiful. So that was May, June, July hits. And I said, I want to host an event because I want to bring all the people together who I'm having these conversations with. Like, let's talk about it in community, not just one-on-one. So put out the event, I promoted it on like Eventbrite on Instagram. And this was for July, which is BIPOC minority. Well, it was formerly Minority Mental Health Month, BIPOC Mental Health Month. We did a picnic at a park here in Yonkers. Beautiful. Had a great turnout and held that safe space to just open up the conversation. And so I was like, okay, there's something here. There's something here. Fast forward to October of 2019. October 10th is World Mental Health Day.
Okay.
And I said, I wanted to host another event. And so between then, I was still launching and posting, writing my blog post. And so on World Mental Health Day, I had the city of Yonkers light the clock tower near City Hall green, which is the mental health awareness color.
Nice.
And so we held a candle lighting ceremony. I encouraged everyone, like, wear green to be seen. So it was at night.
Cool.
Beautiful event, very powerful, very moving. So this is October 2019. And so I said, okay, there's something here. There's something here.
It's growing, it's happening.
Yeah. And community, like people were willing to come out and they wanted to be present and be a part of that safe space that I was starting to cultivate and have these conversations. And so by then it was like people were already associating me like, all right, Maria Mental Health. It's like, okay, what are we doing? Like, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So end of year, between October and end of 2019, I said, all right, how am I going to move forward with this? Like, I can't continue to keep up with writing the blog. And then also what I loved, which was organizing and planning and hosting these events and bringing community together. What am I going to do? So top of 2020, I said, all right, I'm going to formalize because it was a lot. And I knew that one, I couldn't do it alone. Just a lot of work and also my full-time job. And then two, I can't fund this alone, because hosting the events and buying food and this and that and all the things.
Adds up.
So I was like, all right, what am I going to do? So that's when I said, I'm going to turn this into a nonprofit. And so between like January and March of 2020, it was research, informing myself, educating myself on like, how do I start a nonprofit? Like I had no clue what I was doing when I started, but I knew that I wanted to do this. I knew that it was going to be beautiful and that it was going to, have so much impact on my community, on our people. And so I'm the type of person that when I set out to do something and like I feel it within me and I'm passionate about it, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to accomplish that. So that's what I set out to do. So this was, between January and March doing this research and filed the paperwork around March, like right before the pandemic hit. I remember mailing it off. And between March and May of 2020, going back and forth. May 2020, we were officially incorporated as a nonprofit in New York State.
Cool. Wow. Awesome. Right in the middle of everyone's at home, right?
Yes.
So at that time when you filed for the nonprofit and you got that all squared away, did you know you were going to have like this venue? Like you were going to try to have an official like office space?
So yeah. I didn't know how it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Had no clue how it was going to happen. But from the very beginning, I did know that I wanted to continue hosting events. I wanted to bring community together. I knew that I wanted to just have this different kind of safe space that did not exist in our community. And I was going to find a way to make it happen. And you know, here we are. And so like, I think about it, right? So we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of having our center here.
Yeah.
And October 10th, 2019, we had that first candle lighting in honor of World Mental Health Day. Fast forward to October 10th, 2024. Well, 2023, we opened our center, October 10th, 2023. And then October 10th, 2024, we celebrated the 1 year. And in Westchester County, on the anniversary of our 1 year of the center, which is also World Mental Health Day.
Awesome.
The Westchester County Board of Legislators have proclaimed it One Paso Day throughout Westchester County. So we have the proclamation on our wall.
We'll get a shout out afterwards. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
So beautiful to see, you know, how
like it just came together, everyone supporting you, legislators supporting you, is becoming a reality what you envisioned back in 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see that you talk a lot about culturally relevant mental health education. Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, perfect. I'm learning. I can come work here.
Definitely.
So tell me what that means to you, because, you know, does that mean culturally relevant for Salvadorans? Does it mean for Guatemalans, Mexican? Like, what does that mean? How do you bridge all these cultures together? Like, where do you find a common ground for the education that you do here?
So I think that, when we think about culturally relevant, it's very personal. So it's about what rings true to you, you know, because that can mean different things for different people. So I'll, for example, with myself, right? Salvadoreña, right? Both my parents born in El Salvador, first gen. But something, and a lot of people don't know this about me, but so my grandmother, she married, when she came to the States, she married a Puerto Rican man who, my mother, she never met her father. And so when she got here, my mom, my grandmother, she met my step-grandfather, who was Puerto Rican. And so he ended up being, you know, the only father my mother knew. And so a lot of the grandfather that I was raised with, you know, my grandfather on my dad's side lived in El Salvador, so he would come and visit, but my step-grandfather's presence was always there. And so culturally, right, my grandmother growing up, while she did cook Salvadoreño, right, but also Puerto Rican, right, and the music and those cultural things. So I think it's very different for different people. Yeah. But I think when we think about it as a whole, right, with what we're doing here, and when we think about the United States and we think about Latino America, like it's as a collective, as people of color, it's the music, the art, and dance, right? So when we think about it like that, and then also the shared language, So, you know, we speak Spanish, and though there's a lot of controversy that can get very layered, you know, on, but when we think about here, we think of, and culturally relevant services, it's prioritizing Spanish-speaking services to our communities of color and making sure that culture is at the core. And while, like I said, it's very, it rings true to who you are, depending on, you know, so I'm Salvadoreña, right? But then also I do resonate with some of the Puerto Rican stuff because of growing up. So, and a lot of us are mixed, you know? So that's where it varies. But at the core of it is the music, the dance, the art, and how that resonates with each of us. So one of our programs, it's one of our most popular programs is one called Salsa a Salud.
Okay.
So this is our program where, as mentioned, right, we combine dance and mental health education. And so typically, you know, mental health, it's a taboo topic, right?
Absolutely.
And within our community, it's what I've learned in the past 4.5 years is that it's really tough to have these conversations. And I know firsthand, right, growing up. And so how can we meet our community where they are? And through this shared language, and it's through culture. It's in this case, is through dance. So we invite our community to come every Thursday, and we have our salsa program where we're just being present. We're making the connection between the mind and the body. We're releasing, we're like moviendo el esqueleto, right? And just like letting it all out, not thinking about any stressors in that moment. And making the connection between like, okay, you just went through an hour, you learned 5 new salsa steps. And did you once think about all of the problems that you went through this week? I don't think, you know, and most no, because you're focused, you're being present. And so we make that connection. And so that is mental health. That is mental health. That is culturally relevant mental health, because we're incorporating those things, those norms, right? Those like fun parts of
the stuff we all love to do.
Yeah. So like think about it, because like we go out dancing and not even just salsa. But there is all of what I do here, going back to like my roots on like the science research, is based on data. So there's data that talks about the impact of salsa dancing and Latin dance on mental health. But think about it, like when we go out dancing or like we're at family parties or whatever, you're dancing, you're having fun. You're not making that connection.
You're in the moment, right? Yes, and you're not making that connection.
Right. So like definitely in the moment, right? Present. So dancing overall.
Right.
But so like what we do here is that we invite our community through the dancing, but then we sprinkle in the bits and pieces of mental health knowledge, awareness to help normalize it.
Gotcha. It's like when my mom used to give me medicine when I was a kid, and she had to give me literally a spoonful of sugar with a crushed up pill because I didn't want to take it.
Exactly. That's it.
I love like the connection that you talked about between how mental health and physical health are connected. Because I feel like our community prioritizes, we understand physical health, right? We understand what that means. When it comes to mental health, it's like there's a lot of stigma, but there's a lot of like misunderstanding. Like there's this podcast that I had listened to, and I'm hoping to interview the people that wrote the podcast. But there's one scene where this woman has lost her son, and the government tells this to her and offers her 3 sessions with a therapist. And the woman obviously is very distraught, and she says, I don't need a therapist because nothing's wrong with my brain. Something is like, it's my heart that's hurting. And it was just so heartbreaking to hear someone say that, because you know they don't understand the connection between all those 3 things, like mind, emotion, and physical body. Like therapy isn't just how our community thinks of it as for crazy people, right? How do you approach, salsa is one of the ways. How else do you approach bridging that gap, that teaching people that mental health isn't just like crazy people, as some put it?
Yeah, so, well, one, it's really just emphasizing the importance of movement on mental health. So that's one piece of it, but also going back to that shared language that I mentioned. And so in the past year or so, we've been trying to move away from like specifically saying, well, like everyone will always tie us to like, we are a mental health organization, but it's more than that. So like thinking about the word mental health and how just that alone can be a barrier to like, I don't want to go into that center because that's for crazy people. I don't want people to see me there. Or like even at a community event, if we're tabling and I don't want to be seen at the mental health table, so what we talk about now is like managing stress. We are an anti-stress center, because that's all it is. And that's is so interconnected with our mental health. Stress is so tied to our physical health. They're all one and the same. So we often talk about, how can we help you manage your stress? What are your pain points? And so with doing that helps destigmatize, right? Because we all are stressed. We all deal with things. And so that's just like sort of evening the playing field and helping educate our community on like, mental health is physical health.
You kind of tying it to, it's not just like for crazy people or you're just going to go through a therapist. It's like the day-to-day stress that you're facing, not only can One Paso help with that, but you can also teach them that like managing stress is going to help your mental health. Yes.
And then going a little further into that, right? When we bring that up and we're addressing those pain points, then that leads us into having conversations around what are those pain points. And so often those pain points are those social determinants of health. And so what are those, right? That's food insecurity, that's, access to, transportation, right? Access to healthcare, different things like this, right? That often we are so consumed in trying to figure out, and is what causes the stress. So it's like, I think about it, and from experience growing up, my dad was super busy working, trying to figure out how are we going to keep food on the table, pay rent, You think he was ever going to stop and say, like, okay, I'm stressed right now.
Right.
Let me go to One Paso and be part of his support group. Or dance some salsa. No. So it's like, knowing that and like having lived through that and knowing that many in our community go through that, that is very stressful. How can we help alleviate that stressor? Because that is mental health,
right.
And so all of these things are tied to it. Right. That is mental health.
Right.
So we help our community become aware, this is all part of your mental wellness. Because if you're stressed about this, then how can you, be healthy overall? Right.
How can you take care of yourself? Yeah. And I love that you guys have that connection. I think for like younger folks that grew up here and have a better understanding of mental health, we, I think, make the folly of like associating mental health means therapy. Like if you feel mental health issues, then you go straight to therapy. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think we often forget like recent immigrants, like older folks are facing these very real stressors. They're not going to have time or the money to go to a therapist, because they're dealing with stuff like food insecurity, like transportation insecurity, job insecurity. And I think it's great that you guys are approaching mental health, not just from connecting people with therapists, but also helping them deal with these very real life stressors that take up your whole like mental attention.
Yeah. And I think another part of that is also, so like going back to like the language that we use and helping inform our community on like how we can look at certain words or language that we've used to describe mental health, is making the clear distinction between mental health and mental illness. Because what we're doing, mental health, right? What we do here is more on the preventive side.
Yeah.
So like, how can we remain mentally healthy? We can remain mentally healthy by managing stress, right? But when we allow that stress to carry on and consume us, and then ends up affecting our physical health, right? Whether that can get extreme, like heart attacks and, losing your hair, and physically it manifests. It manifests.
Yes.
So part of that is like, how can we help prevent that? So mental illness, I feel, is where the diagnosis come in, right? And, medication, and which is also very real. And also I do want to, make clear that also it can be hereditary, right? It's environmental. It can be many different things. But I think that often as a society, the reason why mental health is so taboo is because when we think about mental health, we're really thinking about mental illness.
Right.
Psych wards and, like straitjackets. And
the movie version of like
Yes.
a padded room,
Yes.
straitjacket. Yeah.
Like therapy, like
Right.
psychiatrist, you're crazy. It's all in your head. I think this is a whole other conversation, but I think that a lot of like media, journalism, movies has a lot to do with that, painting that picture.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but I think that that's often what is thought of when we think about mental health. And so trying to peel back
Right.
those layers
Reel back. Yeah. Bring
is
it
what
back.
we're doing.
Yes.
And like,
Okay.
hey, this is mental wellness. Like, this is how you manage stress. This is mental health. Like, we want to stay in that healthy.
Right. Speaking of that, we spoke about one side of the spectrum, younger folks being more like just ready to jump into therapy, right? On the other hand, older folks, older generations are more like, no, like never, like I'm not crazy, like I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Do you find you have to employ different, what is the experience in dealing with like older generations, like our parents' generations, our grandparents' generations? Is it more difficult to reach out to them and get them to buy into the mental health aspect of what you do?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I think that, I'll start with what's personal to me, because that's what's fueled all of my work, right? Is my experiences with my dad. So, right now he's retired as of like 4 or 5 years ago. And so what I will say is that while growing up, there was that stigma, even until recently, that stigma around mental wellness and mental health and what it is. I feel that it has shifted. And so, well, yes, the mindset did exist. And like, I feel like when I first started on this journey, it was very difficult for him to grasp onto like, you're really trying to embark on this journey that is going to try to educate people on like this craziness and like this stuff.
You're not going to be a lawyer?
Yeah, like
a
you're not
doctor?
gonna be a doctor. So, oh goodness, that's traumatic because mija tiene que ser abogada, but that's another story. But thinking about that, right? Like you're going to try to help people, like, and like think about everything we went through growing up with your mom, and like this is really what you want to do.
Right. So he was like saying like, you already went through this. Now you're going to have to go through with this with everyone else. That was his perspective on it.
Yeah. So it was just like, all right. Like, and then, the other side of it too, when like I was able to leave my full-time job to embark on this full-time, it was like, wait, mija, you're okay. You're really like
quitting your job. That's like the worst thing you can do for like a Latino parent. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, and then him not fully understanding just yet what I was doing, but fully supporting with his whole heart, because like, as my father, that's just what he's always going to do, right? But along the way, I would say that I have seen his mindset evolve as a result of just being present here at the center. So like I call him like my co-CEO, like everyone says he's the office manager because he's retired. So he's always here.
Yeah.
And like this center would not be what it is without him. But the beauty in all of that is that, and I often don't see it because I'm so in the day-to-day and living it, but I reflect on this like with my team who see the beautiful dynamic that we share, and they see just over the years the intergenerational healing. So while at one point it was intergenerational traumas, right, that have been passed down, that's the reality of it. But seeing the other side of it, that intergenerational healing,
right,
by him being present, like at the beginning, not fully understanding, but now it's like, okay, mija, like I see what you're doing.
He gets it. Yeah.
And I see that. And like, so with that, and his presence alone, I will say has allowed, because he's with me, whether it be at the community events, at the tables, lugging stuff from the storage, our canopy, this center, like I said, he's there. And so, others, right? Like I would say other Latino men, for example, let's go there, seeing him fully supporting and backing what I do, and like sort of being like a representative and an
Right.
advocate, you know, like for what we're doing at these events. Because, you know, like men will come up and like whether they're a father with their kids and he'll have just like side conversations.
That's awesome.
So it's like seeing that.
Yeah.
But also I think it's just been in the work that we do is truly for us, by us.
Yeah.
You know, as I mentioned, right, I'm from this very community. So I think that regardless of the age, you know, whether it be for our youth, but especially more so with the adults, because, you know, adults, you know, set in their ways and, you know, like, I'm not going to trust just anybody. And like, it's been important. It's been crucial to the work. My lived experiences, those of my father who's there with me, playing a huge role in being able to carry out the work that we do, spanning the generations.
Yeah, yeah. So he like becomes almost like representative for older folks. Like not only is he like an older person involved in this space, he's also a man involved in this space. And it kind of adds that connection to that population, which sorely needs it as well.
Yes.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
Yes.
Speaking of For Us, By Us and community engagement, I know that you're working to get into, or you're working with Yonkers Public Schools. Can you tell me like how you're working with them, what your goal is, what that looks like?
Yeah, definitely. So the goal from the very beginning with One Paso, being as that for me, I started to come to the realization of all the things at a young age, as a teen. I always set out, I want to be able to create mental health education programs for our youth. And I want this to go through the schools. Like this needs to be a part of like what is taught in curriculum at a young age, because at that age, we're still learning, our minds are still developing. So I feel that it's very important at a young age to be able to educate our youth on that. And so starting from back then, it was always like, I want to provide to our youth what I didn't have back then, what I needed back then, and I couldn't find.
Right.
And so with the Yonkers Public Schools today and other schools as well, we go in and we do different presentations, right? We go with our team, our social workers, mental health coaches. We also partner directly with various high schools. And so two of our current interns, we have a graphic design intern, a social media intern, who are at our center, you know, week to week. And, you know, we do all the things mental health related. It's all fun. And so beautiful, full circle moment.
Yeah.
Last year, 2024, we were selected as Business Partner of the Year for Yonkers Public Schools on behalf of Lincoln High School, which is the high school I graduated from.
Nice. I went to Saunders.
Oh, did you?
Go Blue Devils.
Okay, one of our interns is from there.
No way.
Yeah.
Who's a Lincoln High School mascot? Who is it like a knight or something?
The Lancers.
Lancers, yes.
Yeah.
The Lancers too.
Yes, go Lancers. So we were selected as Business Partner of the Year for Lincoln High School.
Yeah.
And full circle moment because at the ceremony, which happened at Saunders.
Okay, cool.
It happened at Saunders. My former teacher of the Academy of Finance, he was a teacher at the time. Now he's the director of the program. He was also being recognized that night. So he was selected as Teacher of the Year for Lincoln High School. We were selected as Business Partner of the Year. So that's one part of the circle.
Yeah.
The second part, to fully close it, is my principal, he was the assistant principal at the time. Now he's the principal of Lincoln. He was the one presenting the award. So for him also, right, on all ends, full circle moment to have, handed me the award that night.
The former student, yeah.
And then just being a part of the community and completely full circle. And
absolutely.
So, with the schools, with the community, I feel like a huge part of, like I said, what we're doing here is truly just the For Us, By Us.
I love that. I love that. Like, you get to go back and see the people that started it all. And like this huge honor, like Business Partner of the Year for Yonkers Public Schools, that's like nothing to be taken lightly because you're affecting the youth. They're like as like you said, at a stage where like they're very impressionable, and you can kind of like guide them into like what's going to be the next thing. That's how you got here, right? You were able to get into this program and through it guide yourself, and now you're creating this incredible, huge organization. So it seems like One Paso has grown incredibly over the past like 5 years. You started with a blog, some community events, nonprofit, the space, and being named Yonkers Public Schools Business Partner of the Year. What have you learned? Is there like a key takeaway? Is there a key lesson that maybe might help other people trying to do similar movements or similar projects out in the world? What insight can you give us, and how can we be as successful as Maria?
Goodness, I would say for me, first and foremost, it's always been trusting myself and, like not being afraid of the unknown, because it's very scary. And like I said, starting out, I knew nothing, but I did trust in myself, and I knew that, okay, you're going to put in the work, like you have it in you. And if you want to make this happen, you have to do it. You're going to do it. So it was really trusting myself, and then standing firm on your vision. Because for me, I like truly believe that standing firm on your vision, but being flexible with like the pasos that you take to get there, to that vision, and like not being afraid to pivot and like pause and reflect, right? In those moments where like maybe we make a mistake. I don't like to call them mistakes. I feel like we learn from everything. Where's the lesson in that, right? How can I do better for the next time? And truly failing forward. So like those mistakes, those like quote unquote failures, it's a matter of changing the perspective, like how can I just flip that and make it better? Right. And so use that as fuel to move forward.
It's not like a stopping point. It's just the next step. Like this is a failure, but what can I learn, and how can I pivot to the next step from there?
Yes. And then also just like closing that off, really entrusting yourself. I would say, don't be afraid to tap into what you already have within you based on your life experiences. I often tell this to the youth and like mentees that I have, because that's literally what I did, like everything that I went through growing up. I have a younger sister who's 2 years younger, and we would always question like, oh my gosh, like why are we going through this? Like this is so painful, this is traumatic, this is all the things. But I would always say, like, I don't know why we're going through this right now, but there has to be a reason. And like, I didn't know what the reason was then, but now I truly believe like One Paso was that reason, And so what I will say is that use your life experiences, tap into what you have already gained, right? Whether it be a negative experience, you may think it was a negative experience, but like, as we see in my case, I was able to turn that pain and use that as fuel to like turn that pain into power and now into my life's purpose.
And what an incredible life purpose. Like you're really making a difference in not only that community, but like their kids' life and in children's lives. And I think it's a huge accomplishment. Having said that, I love it. How do you keep yourself mentally healthy? Like, this is a lot of work. Like, you're doing a lot. Like, we just talked about a huge level of responsibility, and I'm sure you feel it. Like, I'm sure you see day-to-day people that are really hurting, kids that might be hurting. And I'm sure you feel a lot of pressure to keep this up, keep this going. But you're still a human being. Like, how do you balance your passion and your responsibilities with your own mental health?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because as a leader, I feel that that's so important. Because we often, I say we, and I think about like those that I work with, those who are part of my team, and just like in the mental health space, I feel like it's a space that is like, people often burn out, right? Because we have this pressure, we have this huge responsibility to serve our community and be there, right? For everyone else. And so I always say, like we can't pour from an empty cup. Right. So we always have to remain full. And so for me, the way I keep my cup full is by movement. For me, movement is my thing. So even before like our salsa program, which I am there every week because I need to get these salsa moves right. And especially now, thanks to Bad Bunny, like salsa revolution. Everyone wants to learn now.
Yeah.
But so for me, it's always been movement. You know, we all have that thing. Before it was writing, and actually this was before it was writing, but actually now it's turning back into writing and movement.
Yeah.
So that's like a whole other thing. Like, but more recently, I've turned to running.
Okay.
So like the past 6-7 months.
Yeah.
I always like ran. So like 2019, I started to like get into running, but like past 6 months, I committed. I committed. So like I signed up for like my first 5K in last September.
Okay.
I did my first 10K in November.
Nice.
And then I just signed up for my first half marathon.
Okay,
Like, who am I?
Exciting.
Yeah. So it's been running. It's been keeping my body in motion. I truly believe that my medicine is movement. And, you know, like, I feel like we all have the power to like really identify what that medicine is for us, you know, like, so for me, it's been that.
Okay. Well, keep it moving.
Yes, literally.
Yes.
One paso at a time.
Yes. So if people want to engage with One Paso, like where, I know you're located in Yonkers, where outside of the Parque de los Viejitos, which is on intersection of South Broadway and McLean, more or less the general area. So let's put the question two ways. How can people in Yonkers find you, engage with you? And then how can people outside of Yonkers can they find a way to engage with you?
Yes. So answer to your first question. So in Yonkers, you know, we're located at 2 Post Street. We're here, you know, during the week. We have our office hours, you know, you can find on our website. And we're open to community. We have our programming throughout the week. And then, you know, we also take walk-ins and like, we're here to serve. We're here to help. And people outside of Yonkers, definitely in the same way. So our website is www.onepaso.org. And then across all social medias at One Paso.
Okay.
And so, you know, even outside of Yonkers, you know, we do, because we're not too far from the Bronx. So we do often, even like throughout our programming, we have people who come from the Bronx, even from other areas of the city.
You can walk to the Bronx from here. It's not too far.
Yeah, no, not at all. So, yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. You know, if you ever want to get involved, you can go to our website to find ways to do that. And then even, you know, through social media. So
excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, Maria's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work you're doing. I'm so excited that we have a Salvadoran female leader in the space, because we really need more of that. Absolutely. But again, thanks for coming on the show, sharing your experience, and I hope you keep One Paso going for many, many pasos.
Yes, thank you for having me. And for me, I don't take it lightly being a Salvadorian leader, because we need more of that. And especially within the mental health space, like I always wear it on my sleeve. Salvadoreña.
I love it. I love it. Excellent.
Un poco anormal.
Music for this episode courtesy of Hector Rico, a Salvadoran singer-songwriter.
No soy normal.
Thank you for listening to the show. Salvis Unidos is produced and edited by Carlos Guadron. Visit salvisunidos.com for show notes. Like the show? Join our Patreon and help us continue making content for Salvadoreños como vos.